Hey friends, I'm rskt. I've had the idea for this video sitting on the back burner for a little while, and I've been getting enough questions lately that I thought now was probably the most appropriate time to make it. So people have left me a few comments on some of my videos here and on the Affinity creative session. They've also been emailing me and shooting me messages on Facebook and Instagram, all asking pretty much the same thing. Either what graphics tablet do you use, or what stylus do you use? And do I need a stylus to do this? I'm pretty sure that most people believe that you need a digital stylus of some sort to get started in creating digital art. And I don't know if these days that's all that accurate. So I thought in today's video, I'd answer a few of those questions and show some of the hardware that I use to do my artwork. But I really wanted to make this video to prove that you don't need any of this stuff to get going. And I will be proving that in this video. I think that it's really important for a video like this to exist on my channel because I do get a lot of comments from people saying that they would love to draw like I do, but they don't have a graphics tablet to get started. Or that they've ordered a graphics tablet, but they're waiting for it to come in the mail. Or worse yet, that they want to buy a graphics tablet, but it's just a lot of money to spend on something and they're not sure if they're ever really going to use it all that much. So to all of those people, please use this video as a reference to help you get started and help you also decide if you actually want to go down this path. So first up, what do I use? Well, when I'm working on my desktop computer back here, I use an old Intuos Pro graphics tablet. I used to use a bamboo tablet that I bought off of a uni friend years and years ago, but eventually the cable gave out and I just upgraded to this one. Now, bear in mind, I was super excited when I finally saved up the money to buy this. I'd seen a lot of professionals used it and I really wanted to get my hands on it. And don't get me wrong, this thing is a joy to draw on. It feels really natural. It comes with a bunch of different brush tips that are really useful. It's just I had nothing but headaches trying to get it working. I downloaded the latest drivers, I tried old drivers. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. It has a Bluetooth receiver to work wirelessly, and I've never been able to get that working properly. A few times I even experienced issues where my computer would blue screen, start crashing, and I traced it all back to this thing. Eventually, I just sat it to the side for a few months, and then one day they released another new update to the driver. I downloaded it, and everything's been working fine ever since. I should also point out that there are newer versions of these. They don't exactly look like this anymore. I've got no experience with the new versions, but I hear nothing but good things about them online. So that's what I use for my desktop work. But when I'm on the go, I actually use an iPad Pro. Affinity Designer has an iPad Pro version and it works really, really well. It's the whole reason I bought an iPad in the first place, otherwise I probably never would have bought one. I used to cut my laptop around and I'd plug the graphics tablet into it, but it wound up being a lot of cables. My laptop didn't have the best battery life and it was really cumbersome to bring around with me everywhere. So I got an iPad Pro instead. It's a lot slimmer, it has longer battery life, and it does exactly what I need it to do. That said, I must point out one thing I did not realize about the Apple Pencil, and I wish that I knew it sooner. The Apple Pencil needs to always be charging, so if your iPad dies and your Apple Pencil is sitting on top of it charging, your Apple Pencil will die too. This drains the battery life dramatically, and now my Apple Pencil only lasts about 40 minutes before I have to charge it up again. Now fortunately it takes like roughly 10 minutes to charge, which isn't a huge deal breaker, but they are really expensive. So if you're going to go down that path, definitely keep that in mind. Now I see a lot of artists out there also using these massive desktop screen tablets. I've never tried one. They look awesome. I would really like to get one day, but they are a little bit more of an expensive option. Then again, if you were weighing it up between getting an iPad Pro and one of those, it's definitely cheaper than the iPad Pro. It just has a lot less functionality and a lot less portability. But do you need any of this stuff to really do digital art? I would definitely say no, but maybe. See, if you're doing like photorealistic digital portraits and paintings of people, then yeah, you're gonna have a really hard time doing that with a mouse and keyboard. You might be able to get away with doing concept art and a lot of photo bashing and stuff like that, without any difficulties at all. But I definitely think in those scenarios of actually trying to make things look realistic and look like they were painted with a paintbrush, definitely a graphics tablet is the way to go. However, if you're a fan of my channel and you have seen some of the artwork that I've been producing in Affinity Designer, I would really like to prove to you today that you do not need a graphics tablet to do it. Now sure, it might be a little bit faster, but you can definitely get away with doing this with a mouse and keyboard because Affinity has these really great options in there to allow you to do so. So without wasting any more time, let's jump into the desktop version of Affinity Designer and I'll show you how you can do this. So let's go over an example of some of the tools that we're going to be using today to complete this project. In the vector persona, we have these three options: the pen tool, the pencil tool, and the vector brush tool. So when I'm drawing with the graphics tablets, I'm usually using the vector brush tool over here. And I like to use Frankentoon's Inked Pro pack and use this top option. I'm just going to increase the stroke width a little bit so that we can see it. And then I'm just going to draw a line. Now, when we're drawing, we have this little option up here with a checkbox marked stabilizer. If I turn that off and just start drawing, it's kind of messy and kind of feels like when you draw in Microsoft Paint. It's not really the result that we're going for, and it's going to be really, really hard to start drawing faces. So if we check this box on, we have two options: window mode, where the input positions are averaged over a flexible window. So let's try drawing with that first. We can see that we get this little circle and a small rope dragging behind it. This lets me do really smooth curves. We also have this slider next to it. At the moment I've got it set to 20, so if we turn this like all the way down, we kind of lose that smoothness control that we had before. It kind of feels like drawing without it. So the higher we raise this, I guess the less control over the stroke we have, but the smoother the line will be. And I think that's where you're really going to have to adjust this per use case. I usually set mine somewhere between 10 and 20, and that way I'm still able to trace things and get a nice smooth result, but it's not feeling like I'm drawing in, something like Microsoft Paint. The other option next to it is rope mode. So this is kind of the same thing, except that rope is a little bit longer, and I find this really useful for drawing on curved and smooth objects. Now, it doesn't matter which one of these that you use. I use both of them, but I'm probably using the windowed mode a lot more. The second tool we have in our arsenal is the pencil tool. So you can actually use the pencil tool to pretty much do the same thing and increase the stroke width and all of that. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but usually I'm using the pencil tool to come in and start drawing in things like hard shadows. I can use this use fill option at the top and then remove the stroke, and now I've just got a shape to play with, which can make it really, really easy for coloring in certain areas. If we ever want to edit anything that we've drawn, we can use the node tool over here and start pulling and pushing around the different nodes. You'll notice with this node selected, there's a tiny little handle coming off of it, and I can use that to influence which way the curve is flowing in this line. And if we hover over that curve, we can actually just pull it and push it any way that we want and get a little bit finer control over things. I think it's really good to practice with this, especially if you're going to be using our third option, which is the pen tool. So if you've never used the pen tool before, it might seem a little bit intimidating, but it's actually really simple. Clicking once will create a new node, and then if we just click anywhere else, we'll create more and more nodes. If we want to close something off, we just click on the first node that we created, and now we have a shape. But at the moment, all of these lines are very straight. So if we want to create lines that are curved, we just click and hold and then drag. When I do this, you'll see these little handles coming off of the edge. And this will sort of indicate in the direction that the curve is flowing to when we enter in our second node. So I'll click and drag this out, and then right across from it, I'll click and drag another one. And now you can see that our first node over here, the handle is pointing up, and that curve is influenced by that handle. We can always come back in and edit it later, but basically doing this allows us to create these really smooth lines. Now, if you finish a shape and you find that you forgot to connect 2 points to close it off, don't worry, you can always select this one, shift select the other one, and then go up here where it says join curves. I definitely recommend playing around with all of these options. You can join things and you can break them. If you have a curve and you want it to be pointed and you don't want these Bezier handles anymore, just select this option, convert to sharp, and now those handles are gone and we have a nice sharp edge. You can convert it to smooth again if you want those handles to come back. So that's all very simple, but let's look at the last thing, which I think is really important for just getting away with drawing with a mouse. So I'm going to draw a curve here. And let's say we want a little bit more control over the thickness and the thinness of certain parts of this line. So we can either access our stroke panel from here, or we can click on this up the top here. In the stroke panel, down the bottom, there's a section that says pressure. So what you're looking at here is a graph of basically thickness and thinness. And if I drag this down, you'll see that nothing really happens. And that's because we don't really have a vector brush applied to this stroke yet. So let's go to the brushes panel and I'll apply Frankentoons Inks Pro. We'll go back to the stroke panel and I'll just increase this stroke width. Now if I go to pressure, we can change the thickness and the thinness. If I drag both of these down, you'll see that both ends get smaller. This node up the top here is acting as the middle, and if I drag it left or right, you'll see different parts of the line becoming thicker or thinner. You can add more nodes by selecting here and dragging it up to the thickness that you want. So this is really useful for being able to get shapes to look the way that you want. You can even just have a shape start out thin and become smaller as it goes down. This method gives you a lot of control, and let's say we're really happy with the way that that stroke looks, but we don't want to repeat this every single time. So down here you can click Save Profile, and now this has been saved to something that we can apply to further strokes in the future. So if I use any of the other tools and I create a new stroke, I can apply this same principle. Adjust it accordingly, and now we've got full control over our curve again. That is essentially all of the tools that we need to get started. So let's jump into an actual project and have a look at how we might use all of this. Okay, so here we are in Affinity Designer and I've just loaded up an old sketch. So if you wanted to get started with this, just draw something with a pen and paper, take a photo of it and drop it into Affinity. I'm just going to drop the layer opacity to something around 30% and then I'm going to lock this layer. So I'm using the pencil tool and the rope stabilizer here just to start drawing in the main outline. Now, if you're a little bit confused as to my overall workflow, I've definitely covered that in a lot of my previous videos. Basically, a really thick outline, some thinner line work for the details, and then we create clipping masks with shading inside of them, adding on hard shadows and hard highlights with a little bit of color correction towards the end. I'm not really going to get heavy into the workflow side of things before because I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you would like a clearer example of my workflow, I'll leave a link in the video description for another one of my videos to help you get started. So if we go over to the stroke panel and go down to the pressure setting, we can manually adjust this curve to have some parts be wider than others. This is really going to help us out because we don't have the luxury of pressure sensitivity that a normal graphics tablet would give us. And then once you're happy with the stroke profile, save it with the Save Profile button, and that way you've got it there for later. So now I'm just going to use that same stroke profile to pretty much draw in the bigger shapes of this face. So now that the main outline is done, I'm happy with most of the strokes, but there's a few that I'd like to clean up. So I'm going to use the pressure panel to manually adjust those and just get them looking a little bit better. You might run into a few scenarios like this sort of eyebrow shape up here where he has a wart coming out of it. Those are 3 separate strokes at the moment, so you can either manually adjust the pressure curves of each one of these, or what might be a better option is to come in and actually join these curves together so that they're all one stroke. Alright, sweet, and there's our main outline done, and I'm pretty happy with that. Another thing that you could try is using the pencil tool with the use fill option applied. This can give you some sort of more spontaneous results, but I'd probably do them on a separate layer because if you come back and want to edit your strokes later, you might get some weird results. So I'm just going to come in and draw some of these details now. I'm using the pen and the pencil tool for some of these lines, just to try and get a little bit more control over certain areas and some variation for others. For example, for all of the round or super curved parts, I'm actually using the pen tool, just so I've got a little bit more control over the curves as I draw them. Sweet, so there's our detail pass done, and I would definitely say at this point that the hardest part is over. All of that line work looks really complex, but you can't really tell that it was all drawn with just a mouse. So now I'm just going to use the pen tool and just click around certain shapes to start creating the clipping masks. As I said before, I'm not really talking much about the workflow in here, but basically all that's going on is I'm just creating shapes for us to be able to paint all of our texture work into so that we don't go outside the lines, and I'm joining all of those shapes together. So now that our clipping masks are done, I'll just go into the pixel persona mode and I'm going to start scrolling through some brushes. I've always used the Frankentoon texturizer brush pack for these, but you can use any brush pack that you want. If you're finding some results are too harsh or aren't really that controllable, definitely try adjusting the flow slider next to the opacity option in the top panel. This can sort of give you some size variation that you otherwise normally get when you're using a graphics tablet, and you can play around with the hardness as well. I would strongly recommend using several brushes as you slightly build from darker to lighter colors to make some areas look recessed and other areas look a little bit more raised and closer to the viewer. So that's all of our texture work pretty much done. There really isn't a whole lot to it, it's just mainly giving it a little bit of grit and dirt. Now I'm just going to create a new layer and we can get started on our hard shadows. So I'll use the pencil tool for this and make sure that use fill is on. And on my shadows layer, I'm going to drop the opacity to something like 50% and set the blend mode to multiply. This way we don't lose that much color information that we've put in there with the texture layer, and we can sort of see through this hard shadow layer and don't lose it in amongst all of the line work that we've done so far. That's all of our hard shadows done. Let's move on to the hard highlights. So again, just using the pencil tool, and I'm going to use the same stroke profile that I used before, but just drop the width of the brush a little bit. Use an off-white sort of yellowy color and just start drawing in some of these highlights. Great, and that's all of our hard highlights done. Now, so far I'm pretty happy with it, but I always like throwing on a couple of adjustment layers towards the end. In this case, I just upped the contrast a little bit and then played around with the color balance just to try and get it looking a little bit more colorful. And there you have it. That's the end result right there. I'm really happy with it, and I don't think it looks that much distinguishable from stuff that I've done with a graphics tablet before. So I think it definitely goes to show that you really don't need all of this equipment to do artwork in this particular style, but definitely, you know, probably if you were going to do digital portraits or something a little bit more realistic. So that's all from me today, everybody. I really hope that this video was useful to some people. You can definitely get away with creating a lot of artwork with just a mouse and keyboard, or even a trackpad if you're so inclined. You do not need all of this fancy gear to get started. And just think about it. If you made like 6 or 7 pieces of artwork like I made in this video, get them printed off, whack them on stickers, sell them on Etsy, do whatever you want. But just start doing artwork, I think, is the main point of what I'm trying to get across. Don't wait, just start. Best of luck to everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.